So during this first demo segment, we're going to run you through a brief demo scenario, just to give you a sense of what a traditional AgilePoint application can look like, as well as how an end user might interact. Now from there, I'm going to go through the abstracted design tools that can be used to compose cross-platform and cross-functional automations. And we're going to cap it off with the advanced exception handling that is built deeply into AgilePoint's codeless architecture. By that I mean how AgilePoint demonstrates a much more robust system integrity where my process won't break when an exception scenario is encountered. So this is a fundamental differentiator why customers choose AgilePoint today, and most importantly, sets the foundation for the future use of AI in our platform, which you'll see towards the end. So to get things started, we're going to run through a quick demo scenario. So here I have a landing page that was built with AgilePoint's Page Builder. Now you might build a page for a team, functional group, project, or particular customer, but on a given page, you'll probably have a button to launch a process. As you're seeing here, I have KPIs from a reporting perspective, other sorts of media, and can even bring in my task list. Now in this case here, we're going to run through a task process, and as you're seeing on screen, I have my responsive interface. Now in some cases, these fields might be manually filled or retrieve data from an external system, but in this case, our customer had a requirement to bring Excel into their business process. So what I'm looking for is an Excel sheet that's filled with data, and as you're seeing here, by attaching it, AgilePoint parses all of the values in the sheet and pre-populates my form. Now this attachment can live in any number of repositories, but just for the interest of time, let's go ahead and kick this process off. Now in a typical scenario, you'd see AgilePoint orchestrating tasks across users. In my case, it's coming all to me, but as you're seeing here, I've just received an email notification indicating I have an item to work on. So it's been branded, it supports links and attachments, exposes the relevant business context, and in the event that it's a lightweight decision, I don't even have to go into AgilePoint to work on my task. But one of the main value drivers from an AgilePoint perspective is a centralized, always up-to-date work list called Work Center, showing me tasks broken down by status as well as when they're coming due. I've planned my day and can even pin important items here to my home screen and watch them execute in real time. But for now, let's drill into the task list, and what I want to do here is just quickly show what's happened in this flow since we kicked things off. So a second back, we submitted the process by attaching the Excel sheet. Behind the scenes, AgilePoint is now orchestrating systems that we need as a part of this process. In this case here, we want collaboration as a part of this case. So a Microsoft Teams channel has been created, and all of my colleagues have been invited to participate. Let's go ahead and open up the next step in our process here. And what you're going to see as a reviewer in this flow is that everything submitted has now been marked read-only. Now under the supervisor decision, I have a number of different outcomes with business logic depending on the option that's selected. All driven by visual configuration, and you'll see a little bit more of that in just a second. And then here on the left-hand side, I can always access the Teams channel that was created as a part of this process. So remember, AgilePoint provisioned this channel, invited my colleagues to collaborate, and to ensure linkage between the channel and the process, you'll see here that the channel bears the name of our process instance. Now, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and move things along. And what you're going to see from here are a few additional orchestration steps. So we're going to take all of the application data that was entered into our form, and we're going to merge that into a Word template. So AgilePoint is creating a document and will then send it for digital signature. Okay, so here's my document. Now what you're going to see here is a tabular document, but if you think about all of the various use cases for document generation, think of things like purchase orders, sales quotations, legal contracts with dynamic clauses inserted, all capabilities you can build in AgilePoint with the platform out of the box. Now from here, AgilePoint is going to download that document and put it away in my repository, which in this case is SharePoint. It could be your file share, Google Drive, or any number of repositories. And then finally, you're seeing here that AgilePoint has taken all of the application data and handed it over to another type of automation. In this case, RPA from UiPath. So a great example of multiple types of automation working together to achieve a business outcome. So now that we have a brief sense of how an AgilePoint user might interact with an application, let's move into the design tools that we have at our disposal. So one of the major themes you're going to see throughout the design time experience is that of abstraction. And that starts with data. Now here, from an AgilePoint perspective, there are different ways we can use data from an application. What you're seeing on screen is an example of the optional data designer called Data Entity, where a non-technical user can build tables and columns through point and click or spreadsheet upload. So as an example, if I wanted to add a new column, I would select the data type that most closely matches my requirement, give it a name, any default values, and I'm off and running. Now, just like any other table, it has an entity relationship capability where I can visually define relationships between parent and child entities with extensive design time and runtime security. Now, to understand the impact of changing one of these tables, I can always see all of the different applications that are leveraging this table. But again, this is an optional component. In the next moment, you're going to see how we can tie in to more than 110 systems out of the box. So now we've moved into the automation builder. And one of the things you'll see as I go through this here, lots of pre-built and abstracted components to compose my cross-functional and cross-platform application. What you're probably not immediately recognizing is that what you're seeing on screen is my functional business process. This is not a Visio diagram. This is my fully operational flow. Now, because AgilePoint has been in this space for the last 20 years and brings a very unique codeless architecture, any process can be modeled purely through drag and drop, and I will never need code from a process perspective. Now, at our disposal, as we mentioned, we have more than 1,100 abstracted design tools. So here, you're seeing elements for user participation, both within the organization as well as for secure external participation. And we'll see more on user interface design in just a moment. Behind the plus icon, you're going to see those 110 systems that I mentioned. So scrolling through the list, you'll see things like intelligent document processing, functions, directory systems, relational databases, both cloud as well as on-prem, various RPA providers like Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism or UiPath, and Power Automate, Elasticsearch, as well as Office Productivity from both Microsoft and Google. Further down the list, you'll see a variety of AI services and leaders in categories like CRM and ERP. So think Salesforce, NetSuite, and SAP. Now, when AgilePoint says abstraction, what you're seeing here is a great example of this. When a lot of the other vendors perform an integration, they have a few basic actions: create, read, update, and delete, which means I need to write code if I want to go further than that. Now, from an AgilePoint point of view, having this large set of abstracted integrations means that I don't need expert level skill sets in Salesforce or SAP in order to use it as a part of an application. Now, if I wanted to say create a record, I would drag and drop it onto my canvas and then follow the wizard to my desired behavior. So first, I'll select how I'm connecting to my CRM. So IT has set up a connection string that I have permission to use. And I'd like to work with a customized object. So even if you've customized your line of business systems, you'll still be able to work with those using AgilePoint out of the box. Now from here, it's a real-time mapping from my AgilePoint data structure, which is itself comprised of multiple different data sources, to my external system. So a real-time exploration of my schema in the external system, in this case, Salesforce, and again, exposing all of the custom columns. So for now, it's just a simple mapping where I'll pass name to name, email to email, phone to phone, etc. So very straightforward to bring in these external systems. And in the event that my external system gives me something back, say an ID in the case of Salesforce, I can always map that back to a temporary process variable as an example. So very straightforward to bring in data from external systems. I can also very easily control process flow. And as you're seeing across the top, I have 3 AI control towers that are monitoring key stages of this business process. But you'll have to wait for the last session to see more on that. So let's then move into the UI builder. And as we mentioned earlier, there is both a page builder component as well as what you're seeing here on screen, a form builder. Now, AgilePoint's form technology is responsive by default and provides a number of pre-built user interface elements that I can drag and drop on screen. In fact, there are more than 70 in total. So here you're seeing things like text boxes, drop-down lists, radio buttons, file attachments, repeating sections like a subform or a grid. And then under advanced, they become a little more specific, right? And having this large library of pre-built elements with configurable validation means I don't need to rely on JavaScript for every field on my form. So a phone number, is that dialed locally, internationally? Email and postal code, credit cards and social security. So lots of these elements that are configuration driven and meant to handle very specific types of data. Now, from a logic point of view, all defined visually. So just to give you a sense of how this would work, if I wanted to drag and drop the account is equal to some variable as an example, then what would I like to do as a result? Do I want to show and hide controls, execute scripts and methods, set dates, show messages to the user or a notification, or trigger a lookup? Now, in the event of a more demanding scenario, I can simply chain multiple rules or nest them together, but I don't change how I implement that complex business logic, all done through point and click. Now, lastly here, I did mention earlier that AgilePoint is responsive, but as you're seeing, I have the option to tailor layouts for specific device types or given orientations. Now, I'll be the first to admit this is not oftentimes a required step, as the responsive framework does a lot of the heavy lifting. But as you're seeing here, I can always rearrange, move things to the top, or hide certain fields for a given device type or a specific orientation. Now, in closing here, I'd like to circle back to one of my first points when I opened this segment, and that is the reason why many customers choose AgilePoint today is not just because it makes it simple and straightforward to create complex applications, but also because AgilePoint offers a much more robust system integrity. My process will not break when an exception is encountered. And from what I hear, these are the types of things that many of your colleagues are probably up late at night thinking about. So just to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that, you'll see here I have a shipping task that's currently active. Now, if we scroll down at the bottom, we're seeing a step that's currently active where I apply insurance for my order. Now, in the case where maybe an exception scenario has been encountered and we have a product that's in very high demand, if I wanted to roll this back to finance, who can then validate that the customer's payment terms and credit worthiness are in line with a product of that sort of popularity, as you're seeing here, I have no connecting line that takes me back to finance. So in the AgilePoint world, because there is no code generated when I build an application, a user with the appropriate permission can simply override the default process flow and handle those exceptions. So what I have here is my currently active step and where I'd like my process to go. So that's an example of a rollback, but what if I wanted both finance and legal to be active in parallel? Not a problem. As you can see here, as long as I have that permission, I can redirect the workflow, split, and as you'll see in just a second, merge those two active steps into a single active step a little bit later on. So as you can see here, both of those steps are currently active, but why don't we go ahead and just move that back to the step where we left off. So no matter what exception scenario is thrown your way, your processes will never fall over. As long as you give a system administrator or application owner the permission, they will have the ability to handle those exceptions gracefully. Now I want to take this one step further. You're seeing here I have an order insurance stage, but let's just say, for example's sake, perhaps there is a new compliance or regulatory control that needs to be implemented, where I add additional approval steps. Only the problem being I have a number of these instances currently running. So again, thanks to AgilePoint's codeless architecture, migration between versions is something that I can do on the fly. So I've just moved into my designer, and as you can see here, we have an additional approval step that's been added. So I've done this ahead of time in my designer, but now what I'd like to do is simply upgrade the instance that's in flight. So here's our running process. You'll notice that it doesn't have that order insurance approval stage that I mentioned. So again, if I have the permission, I would simply suspend this. You'll see here I have a button to migrate. And I want to bring this up to the latest version. So as you can see here down at the bottom, there are a number of steps that have been added. So we'll go ahead and click migrate. Resume the process. And as you can see here, I have now dynamically inserted steps into this process through a live in-flight migration. So that's going to conclude the first demo segment. Thank you so much.